So yeah, Blackfire is a profiler, and at Blackfire we take performance very seriously, and we consider that performance is actually a feature. So that needs to be considered as such and tested as such. And for this, well, yesterday I presented the basics of Blackfire and how you can use it to improve the performance on demand. Because by default, well, the first thing that cross your mind, development mind, is usually to, okay, I think I have a problem in production, a performance issue in production or in development, and so I'm going to use my favorite profiler to check what's going on. And so Blackfire is here to be installed into production safely, without any overhead for all the users, except you asking for a profile. And it will help you visualize the behavior of your application. So I'm going to share my screen now. And yes, I'm going to share this one. Okay. So just for recall, a profile is something like that. So that you are able to visualize with all the nodes the stream of your application and the behavior of your application. We can see here that well, this one is already optimized. If I take one of mine yesterday, or a bad one like this one, we will see that we have several issues. Well, this one is a Symfony application. Forgive me in advance, please. We are able to see the hot path and how your application is rendered. Well, you will be able, thanks to this kind of tool, using the timeline or using the different dimensions. So this one, or like a CPU-oriented diagram, you will be able to find issues or within your application while it's running and while it's running into production. Of course, you can use it in development, and you should, but you really should install it in production, because this is where most of the issues happened and you are not aware of, right? So better use it there. So this is the first approach, is the on-demand approach. So I'm going to the home page and I'm triggering a profile here. However, it's usually a good thing to implement tests and automated tests. So there are several steps that you can achieve and that you can use to automate the performance monitoring, let's say. Well, it's not really a monitoring, but each time that you ask for a profile that you want to test the things that you fixed, because you want non-regression tests, for instance. And if you have a look here, well, here I don't have any on this one, but you can actually implement some tests, some automated tests. So let's have a look at this tab, the assertions tab, which here is red. So here it shows different test assertions that I implemented within a small file called the Blackfire.yaml file. So let's have it into detail. So within the Blackfire.yaml file, you will be able to write such tests. Everything is declarative. You don't have to implement anything. And it works basically in the same way than PHP unit tests or stuff like that, except that, well, you don't have to write actual code. So what is actually a test? You will have like a title or something that makes it unique. You will give it a context. So here it is HTTP based with the URI. Which is actually a regular expression. So it means that here you want that test to be evaluated on every part of your website. And you will give it assertions. So an assertion, you will assert that the wall time here doesn't exceed 100 milliseconds. You can also do that for CLI commands by adding this instead of the path and give it assertions as well. So we can even go deeper for HTTP, like specifying several paths or even excluding ones, adding HTTP methods and stuff like that. And you can add a collection of assertions. If you think about how you would implement a test using a unit test using PHP units, a test is composed of a function within that function, this test function, you will, well, set up the context and do several assertions on this context, on objects that you instantiated and stuff like that. So that's exactly the same, except that here you will do assertions on metrics. And these metrics, well, I will come to that deeper this afternoon, but these metrics are the ones that you can find here, for example, in a timeline. Those kind of metrics, like here we're using doctrinal logs or the fast CGI finish request. You have a lot of metrics about Laravel as well, like the hydration for eloquent ORM or the config loaded and stuff like that. You have a lot of them, which all are described here. So you have a lot of built-in metrics that are, no, that's for assertions. This is not metrics. Metrics are here. Sorry about that. So we have like 600 different metrics here. So if I go to Laravel, you can see that you have the config load, the database hydration, the debug bar, eloquent models, the event dispatcher, etc., etc. So a lot of things that you can actually rely on. You can see metrics on like kind of a bag grouping one or several calls to functions, to actual PHP functions. And so a metric gather all the measurements from this function call. So you can actually do tests on the number of times these metrics have been called, like using the count dimensions here, or the wall time, the input-output time, the CPU time, and the network or the memory. You can even add some conditions in those tests. So, for example, here, well, I want this test to apply on every URI, on every page of my website, but only when this condition is true. So here, this one is interesting because it says, well, a database connection should be opened only when queries are made. What does it mean? It means that if you do not plan to execute a SQL query, you should not open a database connection because that's a waste of time. So here it says that if we have at least one SQL connection open, so superior to 0, then I must have at least one SQL query. Otherwise, this test will fail, and you will see it appear. You will see it appear here, like this one, for instance. This one is failing, and well, that's the basics of having a test. The interesting part is that the test that you will define will be applied for each and every profile that you will trigger from Blackfire. Let me show you an example. So this one is a Blackfire.yaml file. This is the let me show it a bit. Zoom in. No, it doesn't want to zoom in. Again. Okay, so I will be in presentation mode. All right, here we go. So this one is the Blackfire.yaml file that is applied to the websites I quickly showed. This one. So this is very demonstration site. We have just a list of articles and different, well, comments and stuff like that. I won't get into details here. And I fixed a couple of things, and I want to ensure that everything I fixed, I want to test them as non-regression tests. So here, what I already implemented. So, well, the homepage should be fast. The main here, instead of metrics, is corresponds to the here, to these measurements here. So on the top. So this is the main wall time, the main IO time, the main CPU time, the main memory, etc. So here I just want to be inferior to 100 milliseconds. I also want that I should not have too many entities or models, if I speak eloquently, if I may. So it means that I don't want more than 50 objects. And you see, I can add more and more and more. And these queries, I can actually find them directly from my my profile. If I take this one, for instance, you can see this colored square showing you that this function call, well, is part of entities.created metric. And this one is coming from the PHP autoloaded metric. So you will be able to quickly find the metrics that really matter. But sometimes it's not sufficient. Well, I have a lot of different ones here, but sometimes you want to rely on your own business code. Right, you run. So the interesting part of metrics is that you can actually write your own, define your own metrics based on your own code. I won't just get into details here because I will talk more about this afternoon. And so, if I have this one, so the user activity calculation or the agreed to terms, which corresponds to some of the actual application code, you can then have some tests there about them. So basically, you're completely free to implement all the tests that really matter. So that's the first thing. That's the first step towards automation. Because well, each time you trigger a profile, you will see if something is wrong. Just like kind of the recommendations that can appear here on all the profiles, except that here this is something that you that you can master. All right, but what about automating everything? I mean, I want to include this kind of test within my pipeline, my deploy pipeline, or my CI. This is an interesting. This is actually the most interesting part of test, because they need to come timely and to be running on a regular basis. And this is where the builds come into place. So using Blackfire, you are actually able to write scenarios and run some builds. So about the scenarios quickly, you will be able to within your Blackfire.yaml file write this kind of scenarios with different steps. So everything is all declarative as well here. So you don't have to implement anything. It looks a bit like a behat scenario if you know it, except that here you won't have to implement anything in PHP. In the background, it uses Blackfireplayer, which is an HTTP client, which peculiarity is to be able to understand this kind of scenario. So you will say, okay, I want to visit this URL and then this URL for this scenario. And for the second scenario, I want to authenticate and do other steps. The good thing is that within a scenario, the same session is kept. So you will using within the same scenario, if you need to be authenticated like this, like here, for each step after the authentication process, you will keep the same, just like your session within the browser. And this is what I wrote here. So for my Bigfoot website, I defined a few scenarios, or actually two. A basic visit, saying, okay, I want to visit the homepage. And here you can see that I added expectations. So expectations are assertions, but not on the profile. There are assertions on functional assertions. So I will check that the status code is 200, that this or that element is present in the page, just like you would do with maybe other functional tests tools. So here I want to check that, well, I have a 200 and that I have at least 10 rows in my table. So let's have a look at what. So this table, I want to have at least 10 results, 10 rows. After that, I want to click on the third child. So randomly, I want to click on this one. And this page, I expect that the status code is 200. This is a very basic one. The second scenario, I will do an authentication. So I will visit the homepage again, click on the login button here, and submit the sign-in with filling my credentials, and then follow the redirection and check that we're back on the homepage and that we're actually logged in. So this is why I have this expectation with this element. And here I also added an assertion. So assert here, we assert something on the profile, on the measurements that are made by Blackfire. So you can add manually those, but the interesting part is that you for every step when you're using this kind of scenarios, a profile will be generated. So each step here, each page that you visit will actually be a regular profile. And that's interesting because then you can imagine adding this within your CI, saying, okay, maybe each time I want to deploy or each time I have a pull request, I want to run my scenario and in order to see if everything is okay. And for this, I will use Blackfireplayer. So let's check this. So maybe I should zoom in again. Okay. So I'm using Blackfireplayer, so you can download it for free. This is a FAR to download. I will run with using an endpoint. By default, it's using the local host. I want to run on this endpoint, so I specified it. And for now, I won't specify anything. And I will tell it that my scenarios are defined in my .blackfire.yaml file. And run. Well, this is pretty fast. But actually here, we only did the functional part. So that's why it was so fast. We only checked the functional tests. We did not implement the all the steps. So now I want to ensure that I have a profile for every step. So for this, I will just specify my Blackfire environment. So this is actually part of the Blackfire environment. Or the UUID. So what am I talking about? Let me show you this on my dashboard. I have, well, because I have a premium or an enterprise account, I have a build tab. And here I have all the environments that I have access to. So you can see an environment as kind of a repository that you can work with a team. Just like a GitHub repository, for instance, that you can interact with. And so I want to target this one. So I can, it's a workshop one. So here you have an environment ID. Mine is called Blackfire Playground. So I just pasted the playground keyword here. And run. So now it's way slower. It's because it will do all the samples, take all the samples to average properly all the measurements taken from the probe. It also do a warm-up step. So it's of course it's always a bit slower. And now it says me that I have now a report. So I will click on it. And voila. This is my report for my basic visit. So you can see here that I have my 2 steps and a profile for each step. First sighting page. So this was the link I clicked on. I asked Blackfireplayer to click on. And I can access the profile to see what's going on. Well, actually here, all my tests passed. You can see here that all the tests passed for each step. Same for the authenticated scenario. So this is a first way to implement builds. So you can trigger this from your CI or your continuous deployment system. Like let's imagine that you want to deploy, you want to test first, and you want to test after. So then you can leverage the Blackfireplayer and your scenarios that will evaluate all the tests. Using Blackfireplayer, you can also implement periodic builds. So this one is configured to start a build every 6 hours. What does it mean? It means that on the Blackfire servers will every 6 hours read your Blackfire.yaml file. So and do some all the scenarios, roll all the scenarios. Another approach would be to run as an integration. For example, if you're using Platform.sh or Symfony Cloud for hosting, you can implement these integrations so that every time you deploy something, every time you deploy your applications, Blackfire will receive a signal, a webhook, telling, okay, I want to run my scenarios again. So it will save you some time. You can also, implement just a simple webhook to do the same. So basically, it will help you keep an eye on your production, on your test, on your application where it actually matters. And writing scenarios is actually very a simple process. It can go actually a lot more complex. Depends on what you want to test. And you can do one stone, two birds, like with testing performance. That's what we're actually doing with these tests here defined in the Blackfire YAML. So here we will have performance as a feature and test it as such. But the second stone for the same bird will be to doing the actual functional test. Well, of course, if you already have functional tests within your pipeline, that you may not want to use this. But if you don't, then you have one tool to do both things. Well, that's all I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm open to questions if you have any.